I wanted to get into this a little bit because it's come up now a couple times, which is this tension between the shared social understanding of time. You brought it up in your sort of intro, Ruth. And then also this acceptance of the personal, the nuanced, like the individual perspective, whether, you're coming at it from, we've been exploring a lot of like the neurodivergent perception of time is wildly different from the neurotypical perception of time. Cultural perceptions of time are wildly different from one another. Your internal clocks are different, for a variety of reasons. And I think it's so interesting to think about what, how do you embrace an individual nuanced perception of time while still striving for, the importance of a shared understanding, right? Like shared markers of time are really important for cultural synchrony. And Ruth, I'd be curious, since you've researched like both sides of that, how do you see those two things reconciling, or are they just constantly at odds?
I think it's a really fantastic question. And I think if we think back in time, let's say, to points where people didn't have their own watches. So society was sort of all geared around everyone getting up and doing the same things at the same time. So women would be cooking at the same time, men would be going out to do whatever they did at the same time. You have this sort of close relationship between everybody's activities. So we have this really strong societal rhythm. And I think if we think about what society's like now, that very strong societal rhythm is probably absent for a very large number of people, particularly since COVID and the change in work patterns that we've had. So we're no longer going to the office all the time, very much working from home, typically working in big global corporations where you might be working in the morning, the evening, or at night. So I think that the idea of a societal time is becoming a little bit more like a global time for many, many people, particularly, in the global north. And I think that this is always at odds with who we are as individuals. So we know things like women are more time pressured than men. People who have lower levels of education or lower financial resources are more time pressured than people with greater resources. So I think that what we see in time and people's experiences of time is that normal pressures within society exert similar pressures on people's experience of time. So if you're disadvantaged economically, you tend to be disadvantaged in time. If you're disadvantaged socially, you tend to be disadvantaged in time. And this can play out in lots and lots of different ways. So one of the things that I think is particularly interesting is if when we start to think about endings and the endings of different events in our lives or in our societies. So if we take COVID for an example, for me, COVID felt like super long, super stressful, super isolating, hated every minute of it. So it was a really long, drawn out experience, and then it ended, but it felt afterwards like it lasted for a really long time. And we saw this in our research for lots and lots of people. For some people, it's still not over. So we've got something that's in the past for me. People with long COVID, it's still in the present. People with long-term health conditions, it's still in the present. So I think the way in which we think about time is individualized, but we have to wedge it into this really difficult, complex societal organization. And one, just coming back to something that Michelle said before that I thought was fascinating about siesta, is this idea of what is doing nothing now? Like, can you even imagine a time in your life where you do nothing? I can't. Like, I'm always like doing a bit of doom scrolling, or like I feel like if I'm doing nothing, I'm wasting time. And why do I feel like this? Where have I got this idea from? And how do why does society tell me this is what I need to do as an individual? And I think these are the key questions. If we want a healthy relationship with time, we really need to think about why we feel the need to fill it and how we can stop doing that as a society, as individuals.